Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Photo Mishmash. This is going to be a fantastic show, and it's a big show. We got a huge piece of news about Olympus, and we have to talk what it means, reality. No hype, no, oh my God, the world is ending. But let's chat a little bit about this. And of course, as I teased earlier, we want to talk about the Canon R6. We've been talking a ton about the Canon R5, but really, it seems like the R6, especially if you can hit this price point, is the real hit. I've also heard that the Sony a7S Mark III is delayed, and I've got the reason why. Plus, we want to talk a little bit about JPEG versus RAW. As I said, we've had these shows, these creative lounges in the last couple of weeks, and two of those pro sports photographers were like, I'm totally JPEG, man. So we want to talk a little bit about that, and I discovered some interesting things as I was shooting some samples to compare RAW versus JPEG, and even at really high ISOs, JPEG look pretty good. We'll talk about that and so much more, plus editing your pictures in this show. And as usual, I am very lucky and very happy to invite back my good friends and co-hosts of this show, David Carr and Steve Scurich. And we'll start with you, David. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. Just, trucking along. Summer is here, and the time is right for dancing in the streets. So
Nice. Yes. Socially distant, appropriate dancing. For some of us.
Yeah. Fully clothed though. So.
Okay. All right. Good. And that's good. I was listening to the Wait, Don't Tell Me show. That's that little NPR news quiz, goofy little show. Sure. And this past weekend, or maybe it was the weekend before, I can't remember now. They had the president of the Nude Recreation Club of the Southwest call in.
Oh, okay.
And Peter Sagal was like, okay, I have to ask you, for the first time in 22 years of doing the show, I've never had to ask this before, but are you naked right now? And the guy was like, yup. And so,
wow.
Maybe the tagline of this show should be, we come to you fully clothed for
good.
Your protection.
As far as we can tell.
I don't know. Steve Scurich, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. You just reminded me. I had totally forgotten about this. When I was a senior in high school, we did this science project, and we did a video. And this is back in the days when video cameras were just like shoulder things, right? And we did a news report, and it was all about, I don't know, I think it was a chemistry class. And we did this news report, and it was news in the nude. We opened it up with what's that Steve Miller song about the jungle?
Oh, Jungle Love.
Jungle Love.
Yeah.
It was just so terrible and so inappropriate on so many levels.
Sounds amazing.
We actually had shorts on, and we just kind of hiked them up, and we sat in a way that you couldn't really tell. So it looked like we didn't have clothes on, but
that's amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
You call me a hippie, and you're there broadcasting in high school looking like you're naked. All right.
That was a moment. So I don't know, just having a good day. Weather's great. Got tons of stuff done around the house. We were talking offline before this whole thing started. I thought I had David Carr bested by installing 3 ceiling fans in my house this week. But my wife reminded me that David actually did all the wiring as well.
Well,
I was lifting to the electrician, and I did the installs.
Right. And the way that conversation came up was I was talking about, David, you sharing the fact that you were tiling, and Chris looked over at that picture and said, is there something this man can't do? So, we're all in awe of your skills there.
Thank you. It's, the jack of all trades, master of none, maybe sort of a master of a couple, but I dabble in a lot of different things like that. And I don't know why. I've always enjoyed doing things myself, learning how to do them. And I figure, if that guy can do it, I can do it. So that's how I got into a lot of different things. So.
Nice. Good. And I want to welcome our chat room. Thank you so much for joining us. I love you all saying where you are, giving us the weather report. It's always interesting to see and hear about that. I could say welcome from sunny Seattle. We are in June, which usually has the nickname Junuary because it's kind of gloomy and a little cooler than you expect it to June be. But we've been having a stretch of absolutely fantastic weather. Just mid-70s, sunny for the most part, a little cloudy now and then, but nice and warm, and it's been beautiful.
Great.
So I guess Southern California already had the tagline June Gloom. So you guys adopted January.
Yeah.
Everybody down in SoCal refers to it as June Gloom.
June Gloom. Yeah. See, nobody's as original as they think. Everybody just kind of takes it from someplace else. So
pretty true.
Yeah. Tom Boggs is mentioning that. June Gloom from Oceanside, California, gray and cold. Your June Gloom, though, is it fog or is it a higher level of clouds? Because I want to get into the science of this.
Where, here?
Yeah, in Southern California.
Oh, Southern California. Most of it was fog.
Yeah, okay.
And you get further down south. Well, I was in Santa Barbara, so that was, and then I grew up in Santa Cruz. So we would always have fog, and then during times of the year, later in the year, it would burn off midday, and then you have the beautiful afternoon.
Right.
But LA is a whole different deal because you have the fog, you have the June gloom, but then it's combined with all the smog.
Okay. All right. Good. Thanks. I like knowing this stuff. All right. So let's get into the beginning of the part of the show where we do a little catch up. What have we all been producing in the last week or so? Mostly it's an excuse for me to share a little bit more about what I've been doing on the YouTube channel and what Penn has been doing. If you are watching this and you're not a Penn member, photorec.tv/join is the easiest way to see that fantastic first year price that we're offering, just $24 for the first year. What went out this week? David sent out an email on Tuesday, was the Tuesday tip about insuring your gear. Why you should do it, options for doing it, and just kind of a little bit more behind. It's one of probably the most common questions we get when people start to get a little bit more serious and look around suddenly at their closet of gear and realize that that's a pile of expenses. And, if something happens, their car gets broken into, or, they have butterfingers and they end up dropping a really nice camera and lens together, that could easily be a $2,000 to $5,000 expense, or even a little bit more. So looking at some reliable and kind of responsible insurance ideas for doing that. That was that Tuesday tip that went out. And of course, they have been sharing with the whole world their RV trip. They're on I don't know what day they're on, but day 7 with 2 tire blowouts so far. But we're crossing our fingers that all that's behind them. And I'm looking forward to seeing some real content from them as they get on the road a little bit more.
Yeah, I think the most recent email that went out was day 3 and 4.
Okay.
They're probably a day or 2 behind on getting those out. So, yeah, they got to be close to a weekend now.
Yeah. So that's exciting. They've got some big travel plans. If you haven't followed, they're going to, I don't want to say crisscross the U.S., but they are planning to cover a lot of miles over the next couple of weeks, of weeks plus some. So that'll be exciting to watch that.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Couple months?
Yeah, I think it is actually 2 months.
2 full months.
Yeah. I think somewhere around there is what David was saying. So
cool. I should pay more attention when he's talking to me.
What? I will say this. I will say when it comes to insurance, I mean, it saved my butt a few months ago when I had a light fall over during a shoot in front of a bunch of high school students. It fell over and hit my laptop, and then sent my laptop flying across the room, and then the light hit the floor, cracked the housing. The screen was bent on my computer and had like a glowy spot. And so insurance covered it all. And, I had a small deductible, but it was so worth it. So worth it. I mean, even the yearly premium, just knowing that just those 2 pieces of equipment were covered, not to mention all the other stuff I have.
Do you mind sharing? Do you do insurance through PPA or some other service?
Well, so I have the PPA. I think they offer like $15,000 in insurance for members or something. And I'm not that familiar with it. I had set up a business policy several years before with like the Hartford through USAA, where that's who we do our insurance with. But I set that up through them, and it's just really great coverage. And I don't like having to pay that every year, but it sure is better than having to pay to get what I had to get repaired. I mean, that added up to a lot. So
yeah, it's no fun paying the monthly or the annual premiums, but when you need it, it's all worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd like to also add, David, you brought up an interesting point when you said you were working with students and that happened. I would encourage people to also have a liability policy if they're going on shoots. It's super cheap. I've got $1 million liability policy so that if I'm doing a home shoot or something like that and I damage somebody's property, I'm gonna be covered.
Yeah, that's good.
Because very easily lights or that kind of thing could fall and hurt somebody. And then I did some looking around a couple years back. I had the care through PPA that's included with your dues. And I think that's up to $10,000 in equipment. And there's some stipulations on a pretty high deductible and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went and I got a PhotoCare Plus insurance policy for all of my equipment, from my laptop to all my camera equipment, lenses, and lights, and you name it. And it was very reasonable. It was about 50% of what Progressive was quoting me.
That's great.
And going through PPA was way cheaper. So if you're a PPA member, of course, you have to pay the annual fee to belong. But that's all worth it in and of itself. But if you are a PPA member, that is the way to go for your gear insurance. And I've also got my liability policy through them too. It's just
great.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. That is important. Yeah. Certainly, you don't know. Somebody could trip over something, and then you are on the hook. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. Other content that went out. So I realized at the end of last week that I had, for the first time in a really long time, released 5 videos in 1 week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And 2 of those were the live videos, this Mishmash show that I love doing. And then we had the Creative Lounge with Terrell Lloyd on Thursday night. But then I had also released videos on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. And the Friday video, well, here's the thing. At the end of last Mishmash, I teased that I was getting a new computer. David Carr, you made a joke about, dude, you're getting a Dell.
Mm-hmm.
And yes,
that joke.
That's what arrived the next day, because a couple of things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end of the show, but a couple of things. One, I feel like I want to be more knowledgeable about Windows, especially Photoshop and Lightroom running on a decent Windows machine. I also want to see how light I can go and still get the performance I'm looking for. And I want to save a little bit of money. So I bought a used Dell from B&H. Turned out that the B key, B as in boy or B as in TOBY, didn't press all the time. Like it would. So that's going back. And a new one is arriving any minute now. I thought it would be here before the show, but FedEx is FedEx, so it's not here yet. And I will be talking more about that. And later on in the show, I didn't tease it in the opening, but we want to talk a little bit about why I feel even better about just holding off on a new Mac purchase. So I put that video out on Friday saying I'm really thinking about Windows. And then a fan of this show and a former client, or a client on trips, PayPal'd me $200 and with a little note, please get a Mac. And I thought, well, that's very, very nice.
Wow.
If anybody wants to do that, sure, go ahead.
That's amazing. Look, GoFundMe there.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't, I do have a budget, but his point really was just like, he was passionate about me getting a Mac.
Well, I was going to say Apple has a new Air that doesn't come with the B key, but you can pay an extra $300 to get the B key.
Yeah.
That's their latest offering. So
nice. That's smart of them. That's smart.
That's pretty much how Apple rolls.
Not everybody needs the B key always. It's like it's not like the A or the E key.
Like millennials don't use the B key anymore.
Okay. Studies show.
What they've done, though, they've actually invented new technology where you push another key that Apple calls the shift key.
Oh,
you hit the B key and it creates a capital B. It's amazing.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
It's invented it. It's really fascinating.
I have to say there you go.
Well, I just say, you joke around, but my son left his gaming keyboard here. And it is this shorter version of a normal keyboard, no arrow keys and stuff. And he actually swiped one of my older keyboards instead because he got tired of using this one. And when I go to do things like the arrow or function keys, there's this ridiculous combination you have to press and then find the little key that does it. It's just like you're describing, Steve. But it isn't made by Apple.
Well, check it. Go look on YouTube at The Onion, the newspaper, the satirical newspaper. This was years ago, but they did a news story on the MacBook wheel is what it was called. And so instead of having a keyboard, it just had a big wheel like the old iPods.
Nice.
It's like
so you're Todd, like rotary choosing your letters?
Yeah. It's like Todd here has been typing an email for the last 45 minutes.
Did you
They're
guys,
all like,
did you watch Marquez Brownlee's review of WWDC, the first
Yes.
video he put out?
Uh-oh.
Every single thing he talked about that was coming to iOS 14 and iPad and everything was stuff that Android has had literally for years in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to start to see a theme here. He's like, again, this is great. We need this, but Android's had it for 5 years.
Yeah, it's totally how it goes.
Yeah.
So
It's funny. Yeah. Let's see what. So yesterday I put out a new Monday Minute. Monday I put out a Monday Minute that was showing you a little bit more about customizing Lightroom. And what was one other thing I was going to say? I think that's it. That's all I want to say. David Carr, you got a new How I Edit video up yet?
I don't. I should have a how I put tile in a shower video, but I don't have that. I've been so busy.
Popular.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're very popular. But I have not done an editing video because I did 2 last week. I put 2 out, so I was like, well, maybe that kind of buys me a little time. But I do want to get back to doing that, and I really want to start doing a little bit more of the. I don't know if it's reviews and stuff because I feel like folks like yourself and so many people are way better at that than I am. But I don't know, just like general videos, just for photo enthusiasts, like all of us. I think people love that, just hearing how you do things and what you like and what you don't like. And I think people soak that stuff up. So I do want to start contributing more to that space very soon.
Sure. Take money out of my pocket. That's totally fine.
No, I'll give you all the credit, man.
No, I agree. It's great. And in gear reviews is really what brings in audiences often. There are very few people that have, kind of completely built YouTube channels on kind of Lightroom and editing.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And the gears is a great way to build an audience.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
The tile comment, I'm curious from chat room, how many people watch other content on YouTube besides camera stuff? I don't know. I know, Steve, you watch a fair amount. David Carr, do you watch things like how to tile your bathroom or new backsplashes? Yeah,
it's funny because I'm literally sitting in these folks' house, like in the shower pan, watching a YouTube video on something just to make sure that I don't do anything stupid. Like I already know how to do it technically, but there's so many different opinions and different ways. And so I like to kind of get sort of like I don't know, just like look at all the different ways of doing something and just try to figure out what the best way is for me. But I watch that stuff. I watch how-to stuff, and I watch all. I'm kind of glued to YouTube these days. So
yeah,
it's funny. It's funny you said, Toby, you've witnessed this. I watch cocktail making videos and a lot of car stuff. But since COVID and everything, I've been working around the house as you have, Carr, and I've been watching just a ton of YouTube videos about home projects and yard maintenance and stuff like that. Literally 2 days ago, I was underneath. I completely tore apart my lawn tractor, and I was the blades and the belts and greasing up everything. And I mean, the garage just looked like a total disaster. Every single thing that I learned to do on that thing, I learned from watching YouTube videos.
It's amazing, and I do think one thing I've learned in watching all these videos is about getting to the point, which it's funny I say that because some of my editing videos can be quite lengthy, but when sometimes people have an intro that's way too long. You're like, I just want to see what you have to say. I don't want to watch a minute-long intro every time I turn on your channel. And so I'm learning things like that, like just what gets my attention, when it's a how-to thing, you just want to get right to how to do it. You don't want to hear the backstory on how they got into doing that. So I'm trying to take that to heart and mind, as I develop my video presence a little bit, So,
That's a good point. I can kind of deal with it on YouTube so long as the total video isn't too long.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If it's like a 30-minute video on how to do this one thing that doesn't need 30 minutes.
But I read articles. That drives me bonkers when I'm reading stuff online.
Oh yeah.
Like the 5 things that will help you become a better photographer. And you're waiting for this list and a paragraph about each thing. And it's like this huge introduction.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too. When I write, I get really long-winded, and it drives me crazy when I read stuff.
Yeah. That's the new style for the recipes, as I'm looking up, especially low-carb recipes for Fiona. And you have to wade through just this pile of crap that they've written before you get to the recipe. And it's all about spending time on the page to bump those algorithms and those metrics.
Of course.
Oh, it is frustrating. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Lots of people commenting in the chat. They are, and that doesn't surprise me. You are watching this show. You're comfortable with YouTube. You're watching other things. But every once in a while on our McKay trips, I hear folks that are like, oh, I don't really watch YouTube. Every once in a while I see one of your videos, Toby, and I'm like, man, I could, I could be fine with YouTube being my only source of entertainment for the most part. There's a lot of good content on there. And it's funny too, Chris is very particular when we have Netflix to make sure that, the kids are watching their stuff on their profile and that I'm watching on my profile. And I'm always like, oh, stop being such a ninny about that. It doesn't matter. And then a bunch of people watch stuff on my YouTube profile, Chris and the kids. So now it's like half gardening, half gaming, and only a little bit of my stuff. And I'm like, you guys messed up my algorithm.
Yeah.
So now I understand. I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, my Netflix and Hulu accounts are that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, here's something you'd like, the friendliest dinosaur or whatever.
Now I know that's what you watch when you fall asleep, Steve. I've shared rooms with you.
I think all that stuff. I just don't watch it, unfortunately. But the kids do, and so they're always recommending me cartoons.
If you like that, you'll love greasing up your lawn tractor.
That's my YouTube feed, man.
Yeah.
Renee will be like half asleep, and she's like, "What the heck are you watching?" Dude,
I know.
Kentucky, who's got his lawnmower pulled apart and grasses everywhere. I'm like, this is gonna be me tomorrow, honey.
Yep, I'm with you, man.
Very nice.
It's fun.
Very nice. All right, let's wrap this segment up, and I'll just tell you, coming up tomorrow, this is the first time I've actually ever done this. This feature has been around forever, but it allows you to premiere YouTube videos and set a time for when a video is going to go public. And I've just got a fun review coming out tomorrow of the Shimoda Explore 30. That's a backpack that you probably have seen me wearing in the last couple of months. I'm a little slow to get this review out. It's got a little skit at the beginning that I had some fun making. It's the first time that I ever had to drink wine while making a YouTube video. And it's the first time that tears were ever involved while I was making a YouTube video. So 9 a.m. tomorrow. That's I said a.m. Pacific time. It'll premiere live. So I'll be on and you can chat. I'm not broadcasting live, but I'll be watching it at 9 with you all.
Cool.
And give it a watch.
That's great.
Set the reminder right now if you haven't already. And while we're talking about doing things, if you wouldn't mind, if you're watching the show live right now or after the fact, please just spend a moment and hit that thumbs up button. I really appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Let's dive into the part of the show that we really enjoy. We have a fair number of images. And as I said, we have a large amount of news to get to this week, too, and kind of dive into and discuss. So we might move through these just a little bit faster than we usually do. Let me jump in. This is the part of the show where Pen members have gotten to send in their photos and hear a little bit of feedback from us on not only with the way the image looks, but more importantly on what we would do to it, how we would edit this photo in the future, or how we would edit this photo. I don't know why I added in the future. So first up, we've got Debbie's. And if I had to guess, I'd say Glacier National Park. And just a nice, big, beautiful kind of scenic vista.
Now it's a JPEG. I'm not going to see if she's done anything to it, right?
That's right. Yeah, let's move over to the develop panel. So I feel like it's been edited.
Yeah, I kind of get it feels like it is.
But I'm not positive. I think there's some nice intentionality here. I feel like we haven't talked about that so much lately. We show it when we're cropping, but Debbie, I like how this line ends right here in the bottom left and gives us this kind of sloping valley up to these pretty epic rocks. We also seem to end right on this tree in my opinion, giving us enough that we know that tree is there and we're seeing enough of it. And it kind of ends at the peak, so it doesn't start to go back down on the other side. So I like that. I think that's a really thoughtful approach to this.
Definitely.
I'm not sure I'm going to add a little bit more contrast.
Sure.
Yeah. Get that dehaze slider over a little bit too, because it's. Yeah. But you may have to brighten up some blacks if you do that.
Yeah, I'm going to bring those blacks back up a little bit.
it's just really hazy on that far top right section of
Yeah.
vertical mountain. And I know that's the way it is, but there's probably detail in there.
Yeah, it looks like there might be, but it definitely was kind of subdued. I'm just immediately wondering what this would look like as a black and white.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'm going to do a little local area adjustment to try to dehaze that right there, because I don't mind the haze off on this one as much, but this one is bothering me a little bit. So I'll just bring that up a little bit and texture and clarity up. And then I am going to guess that there has been some editing done to this because we're at ISO 200, but we're definitely seeing some noise in the shadows.
Oh, you are. It's hard to tell on my screen.
Yeah.
If there's Carr, I think you've got the right call on the black and white. And then once you go black and white, we talk about this a lot on this show. My editing, what I do editing a black and white photo is totally different than what I do when I'm editing a color photo, because now you really have to pay attention to the grays, and all that's telling your story is black, white, and gray. So, I do a lot more contrast. I bring up blacks considerably more a lot of times. Many times I'll darken or lighten a sky to contrast whatever it is we're looking at. But I love this in black and white.
Yeah, I do too.
With more of that Ansel Adams sort of feel to it.
Yeah, it's because it's kind of midday, or it's not like sunset or sunrise, and a lot of times what I struggle with in any shot that I take in that time of day, I struggle with the colors, because even though it might look like what I saw, it's not always, for a photograph, it's not always the most pleasing array of colors, especially when things get hazy. And so sometimes your greens, even though that's the greens you saw, and maybe the sky looks like the sky you saw, sometimes it just doesn't blend as well in a photograph. But black and white just gives you all the detail, the texture, the shape of things, the light, without having to contend with color being a problem. So yeah.
That was a great call.
Good call. Looks lovely.
I really like this shot. I mean, there's not a whole lot to do. I mean, it really is like well cropped and composed.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we got Chris Bartels. This looks like some southern, lane, I think, but this also could be California. I love these. And similar to this last one, there isn't a lot of color that's really interesting or grabbing your eye, but there is these fantastic shapes of the trees and the kind of the repetition of them going down this lane. Is black and white just too easy?
I got something that I'd like you to do first, Toby.
Yep. Let me hear it. The
transform tool, guided transform. And we're going to use 4 lines. So the first one I would draw as a horizontal line all the way in the distance, where you want that to be straight. The road at the bottom of that kind of natural tunnel. And then take and draw another horizontal line more in the foreground of that road, going from point to point. And, just kind of mimic the one that you did. There we go. Now go straight up from there on that corner where you just were. What you consider to be vertical, and then the same thing on the left side to really square things up. And now I would crop it to center that tunnel, or where the road is coming at you, because there's just too much showing on that left side. And it may not work.
It might need, I totally on board with what you're going for. It might need more work than we're talking about. But basically, it looks to me like, Chris, I would have loved you to step a step or two to the right and really center this. Boom. Break the rule of thirds as far as your left-right goes, and just put this tunnel and the road dead center equal.
Yeah. So from here, you'll have to actually kind of play around with the axis and then cropping and stuff to square it up. But I'm with you. Like, as soon as I saw the picture, I thought, oh gosh, what a shame that she wasn't just a couple steps to the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird, because there are times when it's very intentional to be off center, and you can tell, but then other times when it's like if you're so close to center, it's probably best to just be centered. And I think we talked about that last week a little bit with like symmetry. A lot of times we're going for that rule of thirds thing, but there are times, especially with roads, with anything with perspective going all the way out to like a vanishing point, sometimes symmetry is beautiful. It can be really your best friend because you don't really have symmetry. The trees are all going to be different on each side, but that road just takes you right down the middle of the photo. So
yeah, totally. I think if you use the horizontal axis, or I don't have my big screen up and I'm having trouble reading the small words on there, but you can just drag the slider. So the lines kind of get you. There you go.
Yep. Let's bring that crop in a little bit more.
For people watching, I use those guided lines all the time.
Yeah.
And if nothing else as a starting point, but then you can use the slider, or you can use the slider instead of the guided lines to just manipulate things vertically and horizontal. It's like Keystone on a projector. If people have used those in presentations before.
Yeah. It's a great point, because I think a lot of times people forget about these unless they're correcting, human-made structures, and they're totally possible and really worthwhile looking at anytime.
Yeah. And I would also crop out the sky. It
doesn't add much.
Yeah, leave the brightness to the road.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Somewhere around there. Cool, Chris. All right, let's move on. We've got Dolph's isolation in Yellowstone. We've seen this from a couple different clients of ours that were on this trip over the last couple of years. This is that lone tree out in Hayden Valley in Yellowstone. Love this location. And Dolph, you got a nice capture here. A couple of things we're always looking for out there is make sure you're not shooting it too low that the tree is coming up and kind of touching this part. Anything, this is what I say when we're out in the field, anything that has any kind of value to it in your photo, you want that intentionality to look like you placed it there and you are watching out for the fact that it's not intersecting anything else. It's not too close to the edge of the frame. I say picture these items as living, breathing things and taking a big breath. And if it took a big breath and it touched something else that's important, then it's not, then you need a little more room. They all need to be socially distant.
That's right.
So I don't want to make it 3 in a row that we play with black and white, but should we play with black and white with this?
If you're going to leave the sky in there, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. And let's see here. I'm going to sneeze in a second, but before I do that, let's see if I can just.
Yeah.
And then I would really darken that sky.
So local area adjustment. Let's just be lazy in the local area adjustment. I say lazy because we're just real quick. Throw that over that area there.
I like it graduated like that too.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Yeah. A little bit of that still. And I don't know if I've tried this. Can we say color mask and still? Yeah. So even though we're not seeing color anymore, Lightroom, of course, still has that data and can use that to quickly peel the mask or the local area adjustment off the hills themselves.
Nice.
And then we don't worry about darkening them at all. So we could bring that down even a little bit, be it just a little bit more dramatic up there.
Another consideration is to crop the sky out, because one of the problems that you have is that view of the mask starts to get lost with the white clouds right there.
Right.
So if you kind of crop down below that V, so you're not showing any sky, it really sets the tree apart.
Yeah. I've definitely found with snowy shots like this, either black and white or definitely if the sky is blue, a lot of times I just prefer not seeing the sky. If the sky if it's cloudy and the clouds are kind of adding to the texture of the whole mix, because even if you have this in color now, it's going to look more black and white because there's just not a whole lot of other color spectrum going on. So,
yeah, it's hard to do because the sky is so beautiful, especially in contrast to the mountains. But so the story is the tree. So you get these competing visual elements, and you can tell a story with all of them in there. I just happen to gravitate more towards simplicity And then I would definitely take it into Photoshop and stuff up. You got this really dark section now in the middle at the top. That up, kind of break it line with the rest. But there's a lot of ways to go with this, and fortunately, Dolph gave us, really good kind of jumping off point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. All right, Dolph, we're moving on. We've got Laurie. We were talking about this last week, David. Carr, you had posted a really nice under the pure shot, and then we were all sharing our under the pure shots. And Laurie's got a nice one. I'm not sure what pure this is. It's called Night Light.
That is cool.
Beautiful.
And this, what this has that I really like is this kind of early reflection. So we've got that motion in the water, but then right here we have just a really sharp reflection.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And we've got two little planets over here too. Geez. This is another one, and part of me says, okay, you could go black and white, but I love this blue tone and the warmth of the reflection.
I agree.
So you lose all that. So I'm going to stay color.
What's fascinating to me is she shot this with a 70 to 200.
Yeah, that's right.
You're underneath the pier like that. That's something that I probably wouldn't even think of when you're right under the structure.
Right.
And she turned it vertically. She probably, kind of had to do that because otherwise you're just cutting everything off.
It's really well composed. I mean, one minor tweak I would say is I feel like the top piece of the pier is not quite parallel with the top of the frame. I would just rotate the image a little bit to the left. I mean, it's just a subtle thing that with architecture, when things are already so perfectly straight and symmetrical and parallel, it's nice to just make the whole image parallel. I think.
What you really need to do is use guided lines and do a horizontal about right in the middle of the frame.
Oh, would you?
And then another, as your starting point, as your guideline, because that looked pretty straight. Or at the top of at the very end, at the hole. Yeah. And then do it at up there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All out.
Yeah. And then you could do one down each.
It kind of looks a little off. It's because these structures aren't perfectly symmetrical.
They really aren't. Yeah.
That way. And actually, that's with the horizontals, it's squaring it off.
Yeah.
I know that was a nitpicky thing.
No, totally. Yep. And it's what I think is interesting is, there's a tiny bit of crookedness to it. And as Steve said, I think, they're not always straight. But one of the benefits of shooting this at 70 is that you don't really have any distortion. There's no bowing or bending to this, which, I rolled up with a wide angle lens, and there's a lot of correction you have to do to make the actual piers themselves straight. And so that's a benefit of shooting it at that longer lens.
Now, one of the things you have to be really careful of with a shot like this, fortunately, she's fine here, but you work on straightening the structure. You always have to pay attention to your horizon if you're showing that in your shot. Make sure that you didn't get all cattywampus. And your structure is all straight, but then your horizon line is messed up.
Yeah.
Like we're fine here, though.
All right, we're going to move on. Kevin Walk has got a beautiful little waterfall in that Silver Falls State Park area that I think, Kevin, you've done a really nice job with.
Yeah.
I'd
like to see that more in the upper right third, though, rather than centered.
Yeah.
There's nothing really added by this wall of, bits and stuff over there, is there?
It's just a lot of space and a whole different element of color that becomes pretty dominating.
Yep.
Yeah, that way your eye just kind of naturally travels towards the waterfall and doesn't constantly. It felt to me like I was looking at the waterfall, but then my eye was constantly darting to the right, trying to see what all that green stuff was.
Yeah. I don't really have any other suggestions. Just for fun, I'm painting onto the green area, and then you could shift that hue and, make it even a little bit more green if you wanted to, moving it away from the yellow. But that's pretty minor stuff. This is really nice, Kevin. I love these little tendrils of water sneaking over here. This is at 1/5 of a second for anybody watching, which I feel like, and myself included for many years, and still sometimes feel like I need to go to 1 or 2 seconds to get that flowy water. And you run the risk of just starting to get it too pillowy, in Steve's words. And you've got some really nice definition here. And I think 1/5 of a second you nailed it.
I think you may want to consider toning down the highlights in the water a little bit, just to get rid of some of the hot spots. White. I do like the softness and the way it shows. Tone down the highlights a little bit, you'll see even just more kind of misty structure in there, and I think that would look kind of nice. A bit, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and then you can always play if you feel like you want to make it a little bit more soft and silky. The dehaze tool can take it that way. If you want to make it even a little bit more crispy with lots of lines, this dehaze is a great way to do that. Texture clarity and dehaze can all work to your favor there and give you a little bit more leeway. As if you had shot it at a couple of different shutter speeds. And
to answer Vince's question, yes, Vince, we can Photoshop you in there with a giant rubber ducky.
Steve, you'll get right on that.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, we've got our great friend Oso, who runs Nomadic Tours Asia, who sent in 2 pictures. And because of the time change or time zone difference, he is in Mongolia. He messaged me shortly after the show last week, and he's like, I just put 2 new images in. Can you look at them? And I was like, you just missed the show. We'll get them next week. And he's like, awesome. Oh, I just gave the camera a thumbs up. Nobody can see us. So I love Oso. He runs those tours in Mongolia, and he is just one of the coolest guides we've ever had. So it's really fun. And he's also a photographer, because he's trying to both kind of promote his businesses, and he enjoys taking pictures. So it's a lot of fun to work with him. We've got this nice stretch of camels off in the distance, and the ever-present herd of Mongolia sheep in the foreground. I saw this picture earlier because it came in last week, so it's been sitting here for a little while. I think the sheep don't add anything. Yeah, and I'd like to go right up somewhere around here. What do you think?
Oh, 100%.
That's really cool. Yeah,
like the sheep need to go, and the foreground needs to go. That's so rad.
Yeah, that's a cool shot. And then I would take a little bit of time in Photoshop to just kind of fill this in and make it even all the way across, so that there wasn't this little bit of rut and erosion there.
Yeah, you can do some color on the sky, or you can go with a black and white and create more of a silhouette with the camels. I think that would look really cool too.
Yeah,
a lot of ways you can go with it, but this is such a dramatic scene now.
Yeah.
What we were presented.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I like that. And let's just throw up real quick. This is a JPEG, so we're somewhat limited in what we can get out of the sky. But what if we bring the sky back down a little bit? Not much going on up there, but little bits. Little bits. Maybe I didn't even need to do that with a local area adjustment. I could have done that to the whole thing. There we have a little bit of texture going on up there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I really love these sort of unconventional kind of crops and composition types of shots. I mean, you couldn't do this to just any shot with a horizon, with a level horizon and something, the fact that there are all these camels moving in the same direction, and there's just this simplicity to it that is just beautiful. But it's just definitely not something you see every day. And so it allows you to just to kind of play with some very unconventional ways of cropping and composing. I love it.
Yeah. And Steve, you like things to be odd numbered often. I did just count and notice that there's 10. I feel like it's enough that doesn't matter as much anymore. Would you agree? Or?
Well, John Mayfield just brought that up, and it made me count too. It doesn't look odd to me at all, mainly because you have the 3 trailing in the back.
Yeah,
that looks weird now, because now because your eye is traveling from left to right. Now all of a sudden you've got an even number, but having the odd number at the end, I think looks really cool.
Yeah, and also just I think when you get above a certain number, like when you have to sit there and count them, like when you see 3 of something, you don't really have to sit there and count them. But when you have 10, it's almost like it doesn't matter at that point. There's a certain point where it could be 10, 20, 30. It could be any even number, and your eye is, it's too far gone at that point to care, you know? So.
Yeah, the fact that it kind of ended with 3 in the back is fine. And what I was going to say earlier is I would actually take the texture out of the sky. I would just create a total blank or sort of flat space up there and go, you know, pretty bright and then dark on the camels. And then, man, and then I would just put this thing up on my wall, something super cool in an acrylic or a metal, or I don't know. It just, I love the negative space and how simple this is.
What just happened? I reset the clone heel stamp, and now those camels are ghosts.
Yeah, ghost camels.
What? How did that happen?
That is interesting.
Huh?
I don't know.
That's
it's like the album cover of Abbey Road, man.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know what's going on there. Something's weird, but yeah, great shot. Let's move on. We got one more from Oso that we're gonna your special Oso. We'll let you do 2 today, and a couple of things that I noticed here. One, really watching that horizon. Sometimes it's tough to tell. You know, off in the distance, the mountains are sloping, but it just felt a little crooked. And I would love, this is kind of back to my discussion with Dolphs. You know, I would love there to be a little bit of breathing room between this cool rock shape and this far distant rock. If you'd step to the right a little bit, so this was isolated on its own. Not a huge deal, but that's something that I would do there. What else? Anything else, gentlemen?
Well, I mean, you know, we keep going to this black and white thing, but again, I feel like because of the, well, I don't know. I don't know if it needs to be in black and white, but I just, the colors are not, to me, they're not serving the photo the way they would be if there was like the sunset or something that's, the sky is like, you know, a lot of times the sky is where the colors really matter. And when the sky is just sort of hazy and not that exciting, I definitely will play with the black and white, at least to see what I can get out of it. So. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I could talk myself out of it because now it looks kind of gray. And
yeah, I might have not done that. Could be me. I could definitely with more work. I think it could be a little bit more interesting. I'd say that as I started to warm it a bit here, I got a little bit more interested in the color version. Just kind of, we definitely have some directional light. You can really see that.
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
I think this was later in the day or earlier in the morning. And so you could play with that a little bit and do a little bit of dodging and burning, really kind of warming up this side and darkening that side.
Sure.
Anything? Yeah, Steve?
Yeah, I actually like this in color because you get these slight hints of that directed light that are kind of lost when you go black and white.
True.
But I would definitely come in on a freeform crop. There you go. That's exactly what you say. Position that rock in the upper third because being right in the middle just flattens an already flat scene even more. There you go. And then I would go back to the crop again, Toby, because you had a really nice shadowy leading line at the lower corner that Oso had done. You could go kind of right to the corner and then even come down to the top a little bit. Oh, then you start to, and then I would Photoshop that lower right.
Yeah. So Oso, a common theme here between your 2 pictures, watch your foregrounds. And you know, if the foreground really doesn't have anything interesting in it, this is of course for everybody watching, if your foreground really doesn't have anything interesting in it, why are you including it? So nice. Those are both really cool shots. So thank you, Oso. Lori Baylor, she sent this in last week. We're getting to it now. This is called Indian Valley Reservoir. And it looks like there's a fire. So this is kind of a flip of what I was just advising. To me, the most interesting thing here is the story of these trees and the reflection in the water. The sky's got nothing going on except chemtrails. So I'm just gonna, would you take it all the way down? Get rid of the sky completely?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then if you left the sky at all, I mean, that's pretty cool. Totally. You're right. The story is the trees in the water, and there is nothing interesting going on in the sky. You still see it in the reflection here.
That's right. Yeah.
But also, I know this is quite a theme today, but I think a black and white would work really well with this shot. And then the processing would have to be different, you know, more contrasty and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's go
It
black
should
and white.
really pop.
Yeah. Yeah. I want those trees. And so I'm going to hit the J key to watch for clipping. And I'm just going to bring it up a bit more. Overall exposure, contrast to highlights. I'm going to leave alone for a minute. Shadows I want to bring down. I know those aren't the trees. And so I really want to make that contrast. And now the white, I'm going to bring it until I start to see some red showing up on the trees. So we got this one right here. Just start to see some clipping. The red means that there's clipping. Bring it back just a little bit. And then the black's down probably, but the blue is showing me that I did it too much. So what do you think? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, I'd probably do a graduated filter at the top, darken.
Yeah, I would think so.
Bring it in line with the reflection, and also gives more visualization to the lighter trees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pretty nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Nice shot, Lori. All right, move on to Robert's bear. Robert, you posted on Instagram a bear shot from Rainier just a day or two ago that I loved. Really, really cool. So neat to be able to see these guys out in the wild. And this shot has a lot to like about it. This kind of misty scene, snowy, bear mid-step. But what I'm bothered by is he's almost a silhouette, or he is almost a silhouette.
Robert just commented a little about this bear photo. I have two really good pics of this bear on my Instagram right now, shot with a 100 to 400 and filled the frame. This was him walking away in the dense fog. Which is interesting because it kind of looks that way, but it kind of looks, it's hard to say from my screen, but it almost just looks blurry or something. You know, like if you have to explain to somebody what's going on, then some tweaking needs to happen to really simplify the message.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel comfortable saying this, Robert. We're friends, right? Instagram friends. I think you got at least two great shots out of this. And this third one, because I'm not sure what to do with it, honestly. If we can bring up the shadows a little bit and we start to see some detail in the bear, but then you're battling the fog. And I know the fog was probably interesting in the fact that it's kind of misty and that ethereal feeling. But it's just not working for me.
What about just a square crop with a bear kind of right in the middle, just an Instagram sort of post? It's going to crop it down quite a bit, but get rid of even if you got rid of the trees.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say something like that too.
I like that idea because we have this really nice framing of the trees. And when it was a wider shot, we had the kind of end and opening of the trees. It didn't feel as much of a framing device. And so this does feel a little bit stronger to me.
Yeah.
I had a shot like this one time with, I think it was one of the penguins in Antarctica, Toby, when we went. And I couldn't get anything great to come out of it. So I actually turned it into this like abstract art kind of thing. So I was able to still retain the shape of the penguin and the overall vibe of it, but I just really exaggerated some parameters on it, some saturation, or I can't remember specifically what I did, but it ended up looking like an art piece when I was finished. And I encourage people, like, if you really like the shape of something or the overall image, what you shot, you don't have to throw it away, but sometimes trying to make it into this like pristine, great photograph, just you kind of run to the limit and you can't quite get it where you want it. And but it doesn't mean all is lost. Sometimes you can just turn it into a cool thing to hang on the wall that's like it almost looks drawn or painted or stamped or something.
Toby, go back to cropping. I'm not liking my square crop here, but
okay.
Go really low and horizontal, put the bear in the right side, and then drag that out, and then Photoshop out the dark stuff so it's just all white.
Yeah.
Something like that, I think, could look kind of cool as an art piece.
Yeah.
But it's going to take some work in Photoshop.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, good suggestions. And we almost turned every picture black and white. And Steve, somehow we made it through this with no flipping.
Although Kevin was pushing for that on one of them, so.
Yeah. All right, great pictures, folks. Thanks so much. If you're watching this, one of the things I hear most from this show from folks is thanks so much for sharing those tips and tricks, whether it's their own photos or not. But if you're not a pen member, you'd love to get some direct feedback from us. Become a pen member. That alone, I think, is one of the best values of the whole pen system. Photorec.tv/join to learn more. All right. I can tell I'm gonna have to go to the bathroom soon, so we need to really get through the show. Just to be completely honest with you all.
Well, Steve and I can, we can manage while you
warned us about this sneeze that never happened. And
oh yeah, it didn't. It just went away. I should have looked up at the lights. It was so close for a minute though. All right. Somewhere around here, I have the show notes.
And Carr, you'll have to hold up the show if Toby runs out, because I go into Ricky Bobby mode.
I'll just sit here going, unique New York.
I like
that's great. I was thinking about that though, because Chris was threatening to go grocery shopping, and my new laptop is supposed to come, and of course it needs to be signed for. So I was like, no, you can't go. She's like, Steven, David can run the show for a minute on their own, or maybe I actually just thought that in my head, and then I was like, no way, man, I can't trust those guys.
No, you can't. I mean, there's no telling what would happen. We're a surly bunch.
All right. Let's talk about Olympus first. And the news that came out. This is rumored a couple of times over the last couple of years. The rumors got a little bit louder late last year, early this year. I can't remember. Olympus said, though, officially this morning that they are selling their imaging business by the end of the year. So let's go to this view right here. DP Review has the story. A lot of other people are covering it. The Verge is covering it as well. What it means. First, Olympus is a big company, and the imaging division, the consumer, especially imaging division, is a very small piece of that company. They're mostly in medical imaging and medical supplies. And it's clear that they have not been selling at a volume that has been profitable in some time, and they are going to sell. They're going to sell to JIP, Japan Industrial Products or something. It's a very descriptive name. They are the same company that bought the Vio computer division from Sony a few years ago. And
what happened with Vio?
Exactly. Now, somebody who was watching the show, David Crooks, I think, David, are you a Micro Four Thirds shooter? Because you seem pretty heavy invested in this. He sent me a link to watch one of the visionaries talk a little bit about this. And the visionaries are like Canon explorers of light. Olympus visionaries. They're the guys that are sponsored by Olympus to various degrees. And his first and foremost, he says this isn't necessarily bad news. And he didn't mention Vio, but just because Vio is nothing doesn't mean that this company won't do something useful with this. And it also, this isn't a done deal. Nothing's been signed yet, but it's Olympus saying this is what's going to happen, and it's going to happen by the end of the year. So it's very likely.
Well, I read this and I was thinking about it, and what they need to do, so they're streamlining, and then this is going to split off and be its own sort of company that can be streamlined and move quicker and sort of answer some of the demands that are out there. But one of the big problems is they do Micro Four Thirds. That's their whole thing. And they're saying that the main reason for the decline is over the last 3 years is because of cell phone cameras getting so good. And when you're a Micro Four Thirds sensor company in your camera division, there comes a point where you can't differentiate yourself too much from the small sensors that are in cell phones. Where you got Fuji is really smart because they're a crop sensor company, but then they jumped into the medium format world. I don't know. I think it's going to be really hard. I think Olympus needs to consider getting into either the full frame market or the medium. format market, or just something with a larger sensor size if they don't want that to be a threat.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. This, where is it? This comment here, I ignore, or which one? Basically, JIP may still turn this into a profitable standalone company, but in the process, we may see Olympus withdrawing from the global market to focus on just the Japanese market. There's another comment, though, that basically said, I mean, at least in the short term, this isn't going to help, even though Olympus is saying, hey, we're still going to release lenses this year, which that's what they've said. We're still going to release products, I should say, because that might include cameras. But as a consumer looking to get into it, one, not only the point you make, Steve, of they've had a tough time really differentiating. Yes, that sensor is a good bit larger than cell phones, but it still suffers from some of the issues of lower light, being smaller than APS-C, and of course full frame and medium format now that we're all comparing it to. But a consumer getting into this is like, well, I don't know where this company will be in a year. Will the warranties be honored? Will it be easy to find repair? And there are a huge amount of lenses out there, because not only is Olympus has been an important player in the Micro Four Thirds manufacturing market, but they are one of the founders of the standards. And one of the things that I love about Micro Four Thirds is you have a huge range of lenses to choose from, because you've got Olympus, you've got Panasonic, and you've got third parties that have been making lenses for a while. So there's a lot to love about the Olympus system. And I think wildlife photographers that are really looking to lighten their load, Olympus and Panasonic to some degree offer some really nice players in the market. But it's been tough for everybody, even the larger sensors. And
yeah, absolutely.
This is a bummer. Yeah. And I do believe it's the beginning of the end for Olympus. I absolutely could be wrong. JIP could look at it and say, here's what we need to do. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Right. And, they're going to refine the list, and they'll come out okay. But that doesn't seem likely to me.
Yeah, it just feels like the competition is so stiff right now amongst the full frame cameras and especially the mirrorless full frame, which Sony is just dominating, obviously, and it's all moving more in that direction. But I think all the time you hear about people wanting their full frame; they want to move up to full frame. I just sold a lens to somebody the other day that was just like, "Oh, I can't wait to get a full frame camera to put this on," and so to Steve's point, just with these smaller sensors that are not that much more significantly capable than some of the best smartphones, when you really get down to it, it's almost like if Olympus could afford to do something really to blow people's minds with, really, like, I don't know what that is, but something that would just be the answer to, there are a lot of things that we lack even in our great cameras that we wish were there. And if Olympus would address some of those things, they could shine,
Yeah.
They Toby, I hope you are wrong, because they're a company that I've always loved, Olympus. And I was thinking very seriously about getting an Olympus when I bought my Fuji. The thing with Olympus, like the build of their cameras and the look and feel and using them and stuff, it's kind of that old school. I love it. It's so awesome. And they do it better than Fuji, in my opinion. But I have the hardest time making sense of their model lineups, which is just, really tough for a company that doesn't have a huge market share. People to really kind of advise you along the way. So if they kind of streamline that a little bit, and I don't know what the answer is, because they come out with these really cool products, but you are seeing cell phones chisel away first to go down, or the point and shoots, for obvious reasons.
That's true. Yeah.
Now you're getting into more of the manual shoot kind of cameras, and it's almost like they're just chiseling away at the smaller sensors first, and then it's going to be APS-C, and then cell phones will never. It's just pure physics. You're never going to capture the kind of light on a cell phone sensor like you can get with these larger camera sensors.
Yes. Two things though. Three things I got. One is a complaint I've heard in kind of reviewing this, and it's something that I've thought, is that Olympus didn't really embrace their sensor size as much as they should. And some of these latest models that they released were pretty chunky and big. And yes, they offered some serious performance, but you know, one of the reasons people like Micro Four Thirds, I think, is the fact that it allows you to have a very small, lightweight camera system. And if you've got a pretty big body, you're losing out on some of that. So that's one thing. Two, I think you're right, Steve. You know, just pure physics, the larger sensors are always going to do better, but we do have a lot of this computational algorithms coming that we see in like the, you know, I'm pointing at my phone over here, the low light capabilities of the phones when they kind of combine that with the processing power. And I can't remember the third point now because I'm senile.
Well, I will say though, I think camera companies, and this goes for all of them, just because we're where we are right now does not mean that in 2 years you can just maintain some status quo. These cameras are going to have to blow our minds because the phone stuff is getting better. And photography is so saturated as a medium, and especially if you're trying to make a living doing it, you have to blow people's minds. You have to do stuff that is so great and so exceptional, and that doesn't always come down to spending the most money on the nicest camera. But there's no doubt, Steve, your Hasselblad, there's a thing that it does that you just don't get out of a full frame camera. It doesn't mean you don't get great images out of a full frame, but there's just a thing that camera does. And the more you can move towards that direction of wow factor, I mean, I just think camera manufacturers are going to have to figure out how to continue to wow us. And that might be through fully articulating screens and things like that, touch screens and better battery life and stuff like that. But I mean, ultimately the image quality and just that, again, I keep saying wow factor, but that just, holy cow, this looks incredible.
Yeah, I think the big advancements are going to come with what we talked about last week with artificial intelligence and editing and that kind of thing. Because it's one thing to take a great shot, but then I say this all the time, I consider myself more of a chef. I'm out getting my ingredients with my camera, and then I come home and I'm making a meal in the editing room. I did that in the darkroom when I was doing in my film days. But there was a comment that I wanted to address. David Crooks, he must be an Olympus shooter, says I get 50 megabyte images on my EM Mark III and 80 megabytes on tripod, which I understand. But you also have to remember that those are the pixels are just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And when the pixels are that small, their ability to capture light in a really dark scene starts to diminish once you start to blow that thing up really big. So there's a law of diminishing returns when it comes to pixel sizes. If you have 50 megabytes or 50 megapixels, he's talking megabytes. He's talking files.
Yeah, because these are what it does is it does the sensor shift in shooting to stitch together a shot, and it does it very well. I mean, you know, the EM1 Mark III and the Mark II, the earlier one, there's not a huge jump in difference between the two, I think, but they are very nice cameras. But they just, Olympus struggled to carve out a real solid niche, and so now they're selling. You know, and you know, people, they wouldn't be selling if this was really working well for them, or they saw in the future that it was going to go back up. And so it just really doesn't point a rosy picture of the future for Olympus.
That's right. Yeah.
And that then that may be a cascading series. Panasonic, now gesturing to my GH5, I love, and Panasonic has done really well kind of differentiating themselves, saying here's very video focused cameras that use the Micro Four Thirds sensor really well. They've gotten into the G9. DP Review, Chris and Jordan recently did kind of a top of the line Olympus versus top of the line Panasonic. And for the most part, Panasonic came out on top in a lot of those comparisons. That's a very nice photo camera too. But you have to wonder, as Panasonic has added full frame to their market with their SL1 and SL1R, is that, I'm getting that right? S1R, those cameras that are gorgeous, but you know, working around a full frame sensor, will they slowly close down the Micro Four Thirds stuff and move up to the higher end? Because back to that original thought of, that's only when you get that real differentiation from carrying around a cell phone. So we'll see. Time will tell. Time will tell. And you know, you make the point of Fuji too. Fuji's gotten into medium format. will there be a point in the future where they're like, okay, we're done with APS-C and it's medium format that we're focused on now? And I'm not talking about tomorrow or 6 months or even a year. You know, this could be 5 years or less. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not good at guessing this, but I feel pretty comfortable in the statements that I've said around Olympus.
I think Fuji's been really smart, though. They've while everybody's clamoring for that full frame market, and everybody touts their camera features in a full frame and whatever, Fuji's been very comfortable in that APS-C sensor market, and they've done a great job, and they've done an awesome job in the medium format of bringing the costs way down. Where medium format was $20,000-$30,000 just for a camera body. Now you get one for $4,000, $4 or $5,000, which is, I know that's a lot of money, but not in the medium format world.
Right.
And they're coming out with these lines of lenses and stuff. I think Fuji's business model right now is great to stay out of the full frame market.
Yeah.
Do you think a camera company that is just putting out micro four third sensors, that's going to be tough unless you completely reinvent it.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to more positive news. We've been talking a lot about the EOS R5, but we also have mentioned that it really seems video focused. It does look like a mirrorless 5D Mark IV replacement, or the mirrorless version of, but we haven't been talking a lot about the R6, and I'll just say that's my fault. I'm not sure why. I think just because the R5 was a higher camera, we're all excited about it. But let's take a moment for Canon rumors. Feeling pretty confident about this information, because we are just a few weeks away from announcements, and these things usually, when published at this point, are accurate. 20 megapixels, in-body image stabilization, 12 frames per second mechanical up to 20 using the electronic shutter. It will do 4K at 60, which is really nice for doing slow-mo B-roll. It's going to shoot Canon log, 10-bit zebras. The autofocus system will be identical to that more expensive R5. It's not going to be able to do raw video. It will have dual card slots. Remember the big thing that a lot of us YouTubers made a big deal about, which some people were critical that we made such a big deal about it. The fact that single card slot versus dual card slots. And David Carr, I want to talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute, as you're now on the Z train with your single card slot. Head detection AF, animal detection AF, 5 million .EVF. No top-down screen. So that is a differentiation from the higher. It's just got a big mode dial up there, so you don't have that little LCD. You only have the back screen. And the build quality is not going to be quite as good as the R5. Bluetooth, same battery, announcement coming. Under $2,500 is the rumored price, which you say awesome?
Yeah, that is awesome. If they come out with the R5 around that 4,000 point, that's already incredible, especially for the people that want to do really high-end video work and with a DSLR or with an SLR. Yeah, or with a mirrorless. But man, this thing is going to be killer. At if they bring it out under $2,500, they'll sell a ton of those. And
I think so.
It's going to be a great vlogger's camera. 20 megapixels kind of plays into what we were just talking about. You put that on a full frame, its low light capabilities are probably going to be great.
Yeah, I'm trying to find. There is, I think the 20 megapixels. I'm surprised it's down that low when they've had 24 in their 6D series for a while now. So they're backing off, which should mean really good low light performance. It also helps them get to that 12 frames per second mechanical too, buffer and dual SD UHS-2 slots. This isn't the only thing that's going to be announced though. July 9th, it's the R5, the R6, and it's like 4 or 5 different lenses as well. So it's really Canon saying, here, we are really taking this R line, EOS R line, to the next level, the RF mount, and saying, here are a lot of lenses you guys have been waiting for all at once, which I think is a really good thing. I'll say, and maybe I'm being too picky. You guys let me know, chat room, let me know. 2,500, I would love to see it closer to that $2,000 price point that we saw the 6D at, that we see the Sony A7 III at.
It might be. I mean, it says under $2,500. $200 is a big swing. Yeah. But
it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's in a category of its own in a way.
Mm-hmm. Definitely hitting, these kind of video features. Plus, again, I'm sorry, I'm a little behind on this. I'm pretty sure fully articulated and, of course, touchscreen as Canon does. That does mean really nice vlogging, especially with in-body image stabilization. And now it feels like we can look at the EOS R and the RP and say, yeah, okay, those were first generation. We look at the first generation of Sony's mirrorless, and they were pretty rough around they've had several generations now to refine that and are pretty nice. And so for Canon to kind of step up with just basically what is second generation mirrorless, looks like huge improvements and pretty nice.
Yeah. Wildlife camera, 12 frames per second. Granted, you don't get the crop like with the 7D series.
Yeah.
Get that extra stretch. But at megapixels, if it can handle low light well, you could shoot it, 4.5 or 5.6 and with a fast frames per second and get that shutter speed in line.
Yeah. Here it is. I took the moment to click around. The total number of items announced: the R5, the R6, a 50 millimeter 1.8 with image stabilization, a 70 to 200 f4, an 85 f2 macro, a 100 to 500 f4 to 7.1. Nice. 600 f11 and 800 f11 and 2 teleconverters, of course, 1.4 and 2 times.
F11.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I know you're like, F11, that's cutting a lot of light. So one, I think they're going to rely on the fact that these newer sensors should hopefully do well in lower light. Two, with a mirrorless focusing system, you are not limited to good autofocus as you were in the past with some of those higher apertures where the camera would just give up and say, well, you put a teleconverter and you end up at like above f8, you would lose focus points and lose focus speed. So that's where I think they're going that way. And it allows them to keep it small and lightweight. And light bulb, this is one of the things that maybe Olympus saw in the future as kind of a death knell of being able to differentiate themselves as a smaller, lighter competitor with longer lenses. You've got this technology coming that allows full frame to have smaller and lighter, extra long lenses as well. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So Carr, you were shooting weddings and portrait sessions. You've got 2 Nikon Z cameras. Right. You've got only 1 card slot in each. Obviously you feel okay about that.
Yeah, I do. Because I've shot enough with the Z6 over the last year and several months that I've owned it. I've shot several weddings and events and things where, it could have been very critical, and just I've felt very confident in the XQD cards. Now, everything's going to CF Express, but I mean, these cards are just they're thicker and more robust, and just made. I was reading all about these the other day on the CF Express. They just really were made with pro parameters, and just not that it's not to say that SD cards are slouches at all, because they get it's very rare if you're a responsible photographer and you take care of your stuff and you don't try to use a SD card that's 10 years old, you're probably not going to have a failure. It's very unlikely, but it does happen. But with these, I did some research recently, like, okay, just, Google, I want to see how many failures have been reported on the XQD cards. And there was like nothing. I couldn't find anything. There was one guy who said he had an issue, but it was not a typical, I'm trying to remember exactly. I think he was still able to get everything off of it, but it was glitching. But like, I scoured trying to find any kind of reports on it. So that's not to say it wouldn't happen, but I just feel really confident. And I try, instead of having like a huge 256 gigabyte card, I have some 64s and I'll switch them out during a wedding. I don't necessarily want to have the whole wedding on one card and be like, here's the wedding, so if, God forbid something should happen and one card goes down, well, I haven't lost everything. So I would still love to have 2 card slots. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not like, I'm not just like turning my nose up at the Z system for that.
Yeah. I just try to look through my pile of SD cards for one that looks 10 years old, because I have some around, but none happen to be in this little cup sitting here.
Right.
I'll say that. And I don't know where. I have one XQD card to my name. I'm not sure where it is.
Right.
It absolutely seems like an incredibly robust system. And, SD cards I've had literally physically fall apart on me, plus corruption issues as well.
Sure.
The only thing that I can argue back on that is user error, which we've seen on trips,
right?
Where somebody thought they backed their pictures up and formatted and went and shot on an SD card, and then realized they hadn't, and because they only had one in their camera, they didn't have another.
That's a great point.
That peace of mind. But as I'm not saying you're going to do that, of course, knock on wood. But that's just one of the reasons why I do like that peace of mind. But I think YouTubers do make too big a deal about have to have 2 card slots or the camera's a failure.
Yeah, I think it's a convenience that, whenever cameras went to 2 card slots, it set the bar higher. You didn't have 2 film slots in your film cameras. So, and that was way more volatile. Your film could so many things could have happened to your film. And so I think we make more mountains out of molehills with that stuff. But that's not to say that when Nikon's next Z camera comes out, Pro camera, it's gonna have to have 2 card slots. And I will definitely love that about it. But it's just not ruining my day at this point.
Yeah. Good to know. I was going to say, speaking of this, Brian, I saw a comment go by that the Z6 is currently sitting at $1,600, which is, gosh, that's a lot of camera for that price. Rumors, I don't have any dates with these yet, but rumors of a Z5, a very budget-friendly full frame, is coming later this year, probably. And then I know, Andrew, I haven't seen your name go by today, but you always are asking about the new crop sensor Z mount. We got the Z50 currently. There's rumors of an even more budget-friendly crop sensor, a Z30, coming sometime this year as well. So those are in the works from Nikon. And speaking of more rumors and cameras, the Sony A7S Mark III. We have been waiting forever. This is the successor to Sony's incredible low light beasts that you can comfortably and easily shoot at 102,000. Yes, I said 102,000 ISO. It's also really their video focused camera before you get up to their kind of Pro FS line. The rumor is now that they are waiting to see exactly what this R5 from Canon is like, to figure out how they want to market and price their A7S III.
Wow. Sony waiting on Canon for something is a whole.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, and some might say, well, production lines. I think the camera's done and ready to go. It is simply for them to figure out what price exactly, and how do we want to say that this is better than what Canon has, or maybe not. I mean, again, I'm very excited about this R6, and I have not been very excited, R5 and R6, and I have not been very excited for what Canon has done in a little while. As a former Canon shooter, that does make me sad.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to mention B&H has got their mega sales going on right now, and I've linked in the show notes to that mega sales. Your use of the link really does help support this channel. There's a couple of SD cards that are at a really nice price. There are a couple of hard drives, medium and larger, that are at a great price. And those are the first things that caught my eye. Plus, the Mi Photo Road Trip carbon fiber version leather for just $200. That's like $150 off. I honestly don't know how I feel about the fact that this is their leather version. Clearly, it hasn't sold very well. That's why it's at a great discount. But you are getting a carbon fiber tripod for $200, and I can happily recommend that. Mine is sitting right behind me, propping this light up at the moment, and I've been very happy with it.
It's such a killer deal, but like, you got this super lightweight carbon fiber tripod. Why would you slap a big heavy piece of fiber?
I wonder if you can cut the leather off. I don't know.
It's hilarious.
For anybody wondering, usually it's a little bit of foam on it, and this is a good tripod. It converts to a monopod as well, and you can have your meaty little paws on that leather all you want.
people shopping for those, I recommend that Me Photo all the time. I got my wife the Me Photo Globetrotter, which is one model larger than
Yeah.
but there's not a huge weight difference between their alloy version and the carbon fiber. It's somewhat noticeable, but there's a pretty big price difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's just a great tripod all around, even if it doesn't have leather on it, which they introduced that thing. I'm like, why?
So that's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it was heated, if it was a heated tripod, you know, that the leather, like a heated leather steering wheel.
Ooh.
A cup holder on it or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know.
Is that the next peak design? They're going to come out with a heated tripod for us cold weather photographers
with a bottle opener built into it.
Yeah, climate control vents.
Nice. All right. Let's move on. Get through the rest of these news stories so we can talk a little bit about RAW versus JPEG. Last one I want to talk about is that, so I teased last week on the show, I'm getting a new computer. I need to. This laptop I'm gesturing to right here very happily doesn't crash when it's sitting here, but when I do anything else with it, it crashes fairly frequently. And it's time for a new computer. And I feel like, and I laid most of this out in the video that went out Friday. So I'll just very quickly say, I'm a little bummed how much I have to spend to get a MacBook 13-inch Pro with more than 2 ports, which of course one of those ports is power. So then really only 1 port unless I spend above really $1,800. And it's 3.5 pounds. Over on the PC side, there's things that are similarly spec'd and priced a bit lower that are at 2.5 pounds. That does require going Windows though. And part of me feels like this is a slight version. I see, yeah. Part of me feels like this is a slight midlife crisis. You know, like, you know, Mac, you're just not doing it for me. Let me try out Windows. And part of me feels like I also should be more knowledgeable, because a couple of weeks ago I released that Monday Minute where I was like, here's how to find your lost files easily. And someone wrote me and it's like, it doesn't work that way so nicely on Windows. And then I was actually one-on-one with somebody in Lightroom on Windows. And I was like, oh, this is a terrible experience. So there's part of me that would like to be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more knowledgeable about it. And part of me that just wants to fool around with something new just for the sake of something new. So I tried that used Dell. That didn't happen. I'm trying another used Dell. There are a lot to choose from, almost an overwhelming amount. But to get back to the news story, what Apple announced at WWDC is that we're going to see a transition to ARM-based processors in their computers over the next couple of years. And what that means, well, the ARM-based processors is what you guys have in your phones now and your iPad. And Steve, you got an iPad Pro, right?
I do. Yeah, it's not the newest iteration, but it's a 10.5-inch iPad Pro. I think it's it's upstairs, but
yeah. And it's spec wise, it is, and especially the latest one, it matches a lot of these laptops out there without a cooling system, really, without getting uncomfortably hot on your lap. So this ARM-based architecture is capable of some incredible performance for the heat and processing power and power it needs, electrical power. How much we don't really know, and Apple isn't really saying, but we can look at these iPads and go, wow, they're pretty performance heavy, or yeah. So there are some rumors that it's the MacBook 13 that will be coming too early, but the fact that they say their development kit is going to be a little a Mac Mini, probably means that's where it's coming first. But it makes me feel even a little bit better about holding off on Mac and saying, I don't want to touch you right now because something better might be coming.
Yeah, I think there's actually some wisdom in that.
So
if you need to play around with your Windows, have a little stopgap or something, have your fun with your Dell and your broken B keys. But I think to your point, it actually, if you don't need to get something right now, like I need a new laptop for when I travel. I've needed one for years. I'm in the same boat that you're in, Toby. We have the same laptops. We got them in 2013. I say need, but I want. But I'm gonna hold off. And they said that they should introduce a product with their first Apple chip by the end of the year. And then this is going to be a transition for the next couple of years, and they're kind of working on this transition and stuff. But this is super, super exciting because, I mean, everybody knows Apple is just flowing with cash. There's no reason, and innovation sort of, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be making their own chips all these years.
Right, exactly.
For a long time. To get that in-house, they'll be able to turn things around so much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening right now is they want to update specs on something, and then they're kind of waiting for the next IBM chip to come out before they can do that, or AMD or whatever. And it's just going to be awesome. It's going to be super efficient. It's going to work with all their other stuff that they've been introducing, and seamlessly. And I'm super excited about it. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah,
a couple years out, we'll see what they come out with by the end of this year. But
sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Does it make people like me who are in the Mac world and thinking about upgrading? Does it make them pause? Do you think Apple's going to see a slight slump in sales as folks say, I'm just going to wait?
No, I think you'll hear a lot of noise about it because people that play around with this gear every single day, they talk about the next thing that's coming out. YouTubers and maybe some tech professionals and people that do photography for a living or something. You hear about it a lot because you're the experts in certain fields, but the general public going into an Apple store and buying something, I don't think it's going to really sway them that much because they're great machines as they are, and they perform really, really well. This is just taking them to another level.
Yeah. I just point out, you say with your broken B key, I can't buy used Macs. And Brian, you're like, buy a used one. I don't want to buy any of the used MacBooks because of the terrible keyboard debacle. I'm scared I'm going to get some, janky keyboard.
And just send it to me. I'll put a new one in.
That's true. That is true. That's not. And Kevin Walk has mentioned that a couple of times of saying, buy a used broken one and it still has Apple Care and deal with the whole repair process or get it repaired, which it's not a bad way to go if you want to, if you have a little bit of time to be able to do that. It's a great way to save some money.
Yeah.
And I'll say resale value. I think, Brian, you're kind of, maybe you didn't say this, maybe I just thought it as I read your comment. Resale values of Macs stay so high. I could buy a newer a MacBook and resell it for a very little loss if I, treat it right.
Well, honestly, so I had when my iMac was reaching the limits of what I could do with it. It was a 2015, which was not old, but it just, I was starting to do more video and it just was slowing down, and I had maxed it out. And so when I went to get the iMac Pro, which was, they're expensive, but I was able to sell my iMac and get really good money for it. And then I sold a few other pieces of equipment. And so I basically just funded that new computer with selling other stuff. But I was amazed at what I was able to get for what was a 4-year-old iMac. And it still worked really well. It just for what I was wanting to do, it was just starting to slow down. And so, that's what I have. I have a 2015 iMac. And for the most part, I'm like, on the video I released Friday, I was like, I don't need a big heavy machine on my travel because I come home and I've got this powerhouse. But then I've been editing over the last couple of days and I'm like, this seems a bit slower than it used to be. I definitely am waiting for videos to render. And I'm like, why am I shooting this talking head video at 4K? I'm going to move back down to 1080 because the computer is a little bit slower. So, yeah. And Brian, you said to sell my car to fund for an iMac Pro or a Mac Pro. I don't have a car to sell. Chris and I share one car. So sell her car.
I can't really sell her car. She'll be upset.
Get her a moped or something.
Or at least fund the wheels for a Mac Pro.
Yes, that's where we're at. I don't know if you know, but YouTubing isn't getting people rich too much. So. All right. Let's talk for a moment. We got to wrap this show up. I think this has been a lot of fun. We do want to talk for a moment about RAW versus JPEG. Steve, David, let's start with you, Steve. You shoot RAW or JPEG or both? Where do you fall?
RAW only.
Yeah.
But, I do real estate and I do landscape. If I was a photojournalist, probably I would shoot JPEG. If I needed to just get things out quickly and I didn't want to suck up a bunch of space on my machine, I was taking thousands of shots. If I was a professional sports photographer, yes, I would shoot JPEG, no question.
Yeah.
Because think about it, you're not heavily manipulating these files.
Right.
These are not award-winning pieces that most of the time that are going to just be your legacy and stuff. I mean, your work is documenting a pro NFL game, let's say, and that's noble and everything else. But it's not like you're Peter Lick with a gallery of professional, sports action shots that you're going to be selling these things and blowing them up to poster size or bigger.
Right.
So why would you shoot raw? I hope one day some of the landscape photos and architecture photos and stuff that I take, not the homes that I shoot, but just my hobbyist architecture photos will be able to be blown up and maybe sold or whatever. And I want to have the best quality possible.
Yeah, sure.
I shoot raw.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds smart. David Carr, how about you?
Yeah. I mean, I only shoot in raw, just because when I first started and I had 2 card slots in my old cameras, I actually would do raw on one and JPEG on the other. And I just found myself never doing anything with the JPEGs because I just didn't. And I've seen this on some clients' computers where they've got so many files because everything's redundant because they've imported the raws and the JPEGs, and they end up deleting the wrong one. I deleted the raw instead of the JPEG or whatever. So because I like Steve, I shoot the landscape stuff. I shoot portraiture stuff where I really want to be able to manipulate it. I want to have the wet clay that I can move around and shape how I want to. But I agree. If I was shooting sports, a lot of times those guys have to turn that stuff around that evening. It's got to be to Getty or whatever, like right away. They don't have time to sit there and clone stuff and, mess with white balance. And I'm sure there's a little bit of tweaking, but it seems to me that if you're a basketball, photographer, you kind of know your settings. Like if you're a pro, you know what you're doing. You go in, everything's always going to look the same. It's going to be consistent, and you don't need all this manipulation capability after the fact.
I agree with what both of you said. What caused this kind of revisit of this was talking to both Mike Tedesco on the Creative Lounge and then Terrell Lloyd. Mike's case is he has a pretty fast turnaround time. But what was interesting is he shoots JPEG for even indoor sport events where he might be up at ISO 12,800. And I was like, wow. And so I'm going to show you some examples in a minute of I'm impressed with in-camera noise reduction to a level that we'll talk a little bit more about. And then, of course, Terrell Lloyd, 49ers pro photographer, his turnaround time on some shots, there are shots where he takes them and then he needs to push a button where they literally fly up to the editors. And a raw just is going to take too long. A JPEG gets out there and gets onto the Sports Illustrated, front page of their website. So that is. And so these days I do only shoot raw to both cards. I have dual card slots. I shoot raw to each because David Carr, like you, I just found myself never doing anything with the JPEGs. And every once in a while I mess up a setting as I'm playing with a camera, reviewing a camera, and I end up shooting JPEG for half a day or something and being kind of bummed. I actually did that in Mongolia. And for the most part, as long as you're nailing exposure, and you're making sure your white balance is in good shape, it's not that big a deal. Right. And again, back to Terrell Lloyd, he's got 40-foot by 60-foot banners that have been printed that he printed from JPEG. So I think JPEG is better than it used to be. And for some of us, it is absolutely fine. But again, I agree with both of you. Raws give you the most quality, give you the most kind of leeway in editing. But let me just share real quick a couple of shots. I did this morning. I just went out with my Sony and shot raw plus JPEG and brought them into Lightroom. And I hadn't done this in a long time. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, I'm a fan of the auto button. I expected auto to develop both images the exact same. The images are the same exposure, right? No, it is much more gentle with JPEGs. So That's, hey, good job, Lightroom. You recognize that JPEGs can't be pushed quite as far. But so let me reset this image real quick here. This is a JPEG version of it. I purposefully overexposed a little bit. You can see it's a little hot on some parts of this bee balm flower. And I hit auto and it corrects some of that, but the hot parts just start to look gray. Whereas if we move over to the raw version of it, which straight out of camera does not look as good, and we hit auto, we don't see that gray as much. There's still color in these little pieces here. And if we do both side by side with the C key here, and we look, Oh, you know, I wanted to say one other thing about the raw process, or the ARM, the Mac. Adobe has been given advanced access to these ARM processors and is a close partner. They were mentioned during WWDC. So both Photoshop and Lightroom should run very well right out of the gate on these ARM processors. Another thing for us photographers to be kind of excited about. So you can just see just a little bit more detail in these brighter zones here than you have over on the JPEG. But I have to say, in general, the JPEG looks pretty darn good. Let's move on. I wanted one where I really kind of overexposed even too much, but they're not worth looking at. But let's move on to my salad lunch, side by side. Raw on the left, JPEG on the right. And I have to say, this is shot at ISO 12,800. The noise reduction in the JPEG is pretty impressive. I played around for a little while with noise reduction in Lightroom on the RAW, and I couldn't get it to look quite as good. And that, many of our phones these days shoot RAW, and I used to be excited about that. Oh, it shoots RAW. But then I realized that the in-camera noise reduction and the processing, because it has, direct tendrils into the processing stuff, can do a better job than I can after the fact. So I always shoot JPEG on my phones. Just raw is just, but this gives me pause like, wow, I could certainly run it through Topaz and I think I would see an improvement, but I'm impressed with how good the JPEG looks, even at 12,800, even after I do some raw editing. Last example to show though, that I think does a good job, is this underexposed shot. Raw on the left, JPEG on the right. Yeah, same shot. Yes. This one, when underexposed and bringing up that exposure value up to match, really much noisier in the JPEG. So that's where you're seeing that, hey, if you don't nail the exposure right, a RAW gives you so much more room to work with than a JPEG.
Yeah, and I think that touches a really good point, is that if you're going to shoot JPEG only, and there's all kinds of reasons as to why you would do that, you better know what you're doing with your camera, and you better get your settings right on. The margin or the area of error that you have is a lot more narrow than when you're shooting RAW, and that's probably why I like shooting RAW, because as much as I know how to use my camera and everything else, the lighting changes and blah, 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 all this stuff. And I'm allowed a lot of leeway with that. And if I have a raw file, I can always make a JPEG out of it. You can't go back and make a raw out of a JPEG.
Well, although, I'm sure Topaz is working on that.
No, they have that already. They've got that. They have software that's supposed to look at, I haven't tried that. I should. Okay. They have that. I would not rely on it. I am not seeing a lot of people talking about it, but yeah, that's there.
It takes 4 hours to render it, but it's good.
Yeah, first I've heard of it, breaking pixels up instead of missing them.
Well, it's funny, in Tanzania back in August on the McKay trip, I was shooting video with my Z6 a lot, and every now and then while I was shooting the video, I would just press the shutter button because it will shoot a JPEG while you're shooting video. It won't go to a RAW, and I was going through my photos that evening and I saw this shot of a lion's head that was so dark. I was like, it was almost unusable. So I just brought the exposure all the way up and I was like, look what I did to this photo. And I made it black and white. And I was showing somebody like how to edit this image. And then I realized, wait, this is a JPEG. The whole time I've been editing this, I didn't realize it was a JPEG. So I was amazed at what I was able to pull out of even a JPEG. So I don't know if that's camera specific or what, but I mean, sure, I would have much rather had it as a raw photo, but I was blown away because you almost couldn't even see any information. It was so dark, and I was able to pull it up and make a great shot out of it. So
cool.
Cameras are just incredible what they're able to do now, raw or JPEG.
When you get the settings right for the scene.
Yeah.
You got to know how to use your equipment.
Yeah. And it's got to be, you still have to be in focus, and you still have to, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you still got to get right, but.
And these sports shooters, I mean, obviously they have all kinds of reasons why they should shoot JPEG. I agree with all that. But they do it day in and day out. Same or the same lighting,
right.
Controlled environment, and even on open stadiums with shadows and stuff, I mean, they can make adjustments, but for the most part, they've got their settings. They're moving quickly, they're shooting JPEG, but they've got it down. They've got it dialed in, especially at those high levels. They obviously know how to use their equipment.
Sure.
Okay, shoot JPEG. What kind of leeway do you really need in the editing room?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and we're seeing that from the pros and where speed is. But I think what folks should take away from this is, one, if you accidentally end up shooting JPEG, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
And there too, when time is precious, or if you find yourself with somehow out in the middle of an amazing scene and you have a very small card with you, you could switch over to JPEG if you need to get more shots and not feel like you are ruining your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think that's where we're going to end the show.
Cool.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I felt like this was a great show because you lent your brains and your voices. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And chat room, thank you for hanging out with us. If you haven't already, though, please give us thanks by thumbs up. And if you don't follow David, you can find him at DavidCarr_photo on Instagram. And his YouTube link is right down below. You can follow his channel and see his latest How I Edit video. So thank you, David, for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys. As always, thank you, Toby. Thank you, Steve. All of you in the chat room. It's always a pleasure.
And Steve, thanks so much. We weren't going to ask whether or not you flew the drone because you told me not to because you haven't flown it yet. So
it took me years to finally get a drone. So give me a year before I go out on the first flight, at least. Totally.
You've got one at least now. So
yeah, I've got one now. I'll get to it. It's probably driving some people nuts. And like, yeah, this schmuck, he buys this awesome he doesn't in the air. I bought it for business purposes, and I'm not commercially licensed yet. And so it's
totally.
I am
a bunch of excuses. Wah. Yeah. If it's bothering anybody that you haven't flown your drone yet, though, they need to get a life. But you're probably right. Somebody out there is like that.
Think about some other stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But you can find Steve at Scurich on Instagram, and his Facebook page, his photography Facebook page, is linked right down below as well. So again, thank you guys. Thank you, chat room. I believe we'll be back next week, same time, same place.
Sounds
and
good to me.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Adios.